Hello everyone. Back again with film recaps. In this video, I'm going to recap one of the thriller mystery films from 2020, titled The Kid Detective. Before we get to the storyline, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and great day. Without further ado, let's get straight to the storyline. The movie opens in a quiet suburban neighborhood where a teenager named Gracie walks toward school. Just then, a car creeps along the road behind her. Gracie seems to recognize the person in the car, and she slowly heads toward it. The scene then shifts to Abe, a washed-up detective who's barely scraping by. He has to rely on pills to stay focused, and his financial struggles have forced him to share a cramped apartment with a roommate. Not long after, his worried parents drop by for a visit, only to be shocked by the filth and disarray of his home. Trying to save face, Abe insists he's landed a major case, but the reality is far more pathetic. He's actually been hired to investigate whether someone is gay or not. Later that night, Abe heads to the local bar for a pint, but he's warned by the others that a guy named Rory is also here. Abe still decides to stay, and he ends up getting beaten up in the parking lot. We learn that Abe was once the town's beloved kid detective, and at just 13, he solved his first case of the missing fundraiser money by pinning it on the neighborhood bully, Rory. The film then flashes back to Abe's childhood, when he ran his detective agency out of a treehouse. Teenagers from around town would come to him with small problems like lost items, and cheating boyfriends, and Abe would solve them with ease. He was so intelligent that while watching movies, he used to spot the bad guy, and the ending in the first scenes. This earned him a reputation, and soon, the entire town raised enough money to give him a proper office. Abe's assistant was none other than the mayor's daughter, Gracie, and he paid her in pop soda. One day, Principal Irwin came by to report the missing fundraiser money, and Abe, using his wits, quickly deduced that the culprit was Rory. Even the cops used to show up at his office to solve their own crime-related problems. But everything changed the day Gracie, his trusted assistant, vanished on her way to school. Her sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through the town, and despite the police launching a full investigation, weeks passed with no leads. The grief-stricken people then turned to Abe as their only hope. He tried his best for months, obsessing over the little clues and hints. But all his efforts proved futile, and the poor teenager was never found. This marked the end of Abe's childhood, and the beginning of a long, downward spiral. Back in the present, Abe is jolted awake by his new assistant, who reveals that he's already late for work. Still aching from the beating, he slowly makes his way to the office, drawing disapproving looks from the townsfolk who once adored him. Abe soon reaches his office, and explains to Lucy that he was beaten up by Rory, who's still pissed for getting suspended 20 years ago. After this, he retreats into his small office, and resumes his usual routine of taking petty cases like finding missing cats, and figuring out if someone is lying. Abe's situation has become so pathetic that later at home, he has to ask his roommate to buy basic necessities like toilet paper. The next morning, when Abe arrives at his office, he finds a teenager named Caroline waiting for him. He's expecting another useless case, but his jaw drops when she reveals that her boyfriend, Patrick, has been murdered with 17 stab wounds. In the evening, Abe goes to his parents' house for dinner, where other relatives have also gathered. The mood is awkward as everyone offers forced smiles and patronizing comments to lift his spirits. Abe then breaks the news that he's finally landed a real case, the first murder investigation of his entire career. His dad immediately becomes worried, and says he shouldn't take it, implying it's way above his expertise. But this only enrages Abe, and he shouts at everyone that he was once a kid genius, and is more than ready to take on this case. The next day, Abe begins the investigation by questioning Caroline. He asks if Patrick had any enemies, used drugs, or was involved in anything strange like demon worship. But she denies everything, saying her boyfriend was the class topper, and a genuinely good person. Patrick's spotless image leaves Abe with little to go on, but he's certain the boy was hiding something. Later, Abe and Caroline decide to question Patrick's friends, and head to the house of a nerdy classmate named Calvin. At first, he shares trivial details like how Patrick collected bottle caps, and was oddly impatient around disabled people. But then, he drops a shocking revelation that Patrick had a second girlfriend. He had a picture of her in his locker, in which she was completely naked, except for a tiger mask. Caroline is stunned and refuses to believe it, but Calvin insists he's telling the truth. That evening, Abe and Caroline sit at a diner, and she's still shaken by the earlier revelation. She explains that she liked Patrick because he was different from the others. He used to place origamis in her locker before an important test or event. Abe questions how she knew it was from him, to which Caroline says it's because Patrick was the only Asian at school. Despite everything that has happened, she's still willing to continue the investigation and find out who the killer is. Later that night, Abe and Caroline sneak into the school, hoping to find the photo of the mysterious girl in Patrick's locker. When they arrive, they discover the locker has already been cleared out by the police. But Caroline reveals that she still has her boyfriend's jacket, and leads him to her locker and brings out the jacket. Abe checks every pocket, and eventually finds a bottle of illegal pills, leaving both of them stunned. The next morning, before heading to work, Abe swallows one of the pills, curious to see what it actually does. He also visits some junkie boys in the neighborhood, and shows them the bottle. Abe vows to give it to them if they reveal what they're used for. The boys examine it, and explain that the pills are called ego boosters, a rare type of drug used to artificially enhance self-esteem. They're quite expensive in the market, and usually take some time to kick in after being consumed. Intrigued, Abe asks where someone can get these, and the boys point him toward a local candy store. They mention that one has to pretend to have a headache to get the pills. The scene then cuts to outside the store where Abe is anxiously waiting for Caroline to return. But she soon walks out, holding nothing but an ice cream cone, making it clear that the boys had lied to them. All of a sudden, the pill Abe took earlier kicks in, and he goes to confront the boys with a surge of confidence. He beats the shit out of their leader, and demands to know who's the real supplier. He snatches away the bottle, and the scared boy reveals that the local Red Shoe gang sells them, and tries to warn that the pills are extremely addictive. After this, he heads straight to the deadly gang's den, and makes an appointment with the leader. An unhinged Abe confronts him face to face and insists on talking about Patrick, but the leader doesn't take him seriously and simply says no. With nothing to show for the visit, Abe gets out of the den, and lies to Caroline that he couldn't find the leader. Later, Abe visits Patrick's home hoping to gather more information from his parents, but the conversation quickly goes downhill. When he brings up Patrick's drug use, and suggests he may have been involved in multiple relationships, the parents grow visibly upset. On the way home, Abe receives a call from his assistant, who's finally tracked down the Tiger Girl's social media account. Wasting no time, he heads straight to her listed address and meets her in person, only to discover that she's much older than Patrick. When he begins questioning, the girl clarifies that Patrick wasn't in danger from the Red Shoe gang. In fact, they used him to distribute their drugs. It turns out the school administration had access to everyone's lockers due to drug problems. But since top students like Patrick were trusted and rarely suspected, they stayed off the radar, making them the perfect cover. Abe is disgusted by the revelation, but at least he knows Patrick wasn't killed by the gang. Later, Abe pays a visit to Principal Irwin at the school, hoping to dig deeper into Patrick's past. The old man doesn't offer much, but he does mention that Calvin once said Patrick might be involved in something suspicious. Upon hearing this, Abe becomes certain that Calvin knows more about the case, so he later sneaks into the boys' room to find answers. Abe rummages through the drawer and finds a note, which shockingly reveals that Calvin has a massive crush on Caroline. He tries to extract more information from the computer, but Calvin suddenly arrives, forcing Abe to hide inside the closet. Even worse, the poor guy is forced to watch on as the nerd plays non-stop games on his computer for hours. At night, Calvin finally leaves to have dinner, giving Abe the chance to make a run for it. But he's once again forced to hide in a closet, when Calvin's sister goes upstairs to pee. He is forced to hide in the girl's closet this time. Some more hours pass by, and Abe secretly watches on as the little girl talks to her friends on the phone. She soon goes to sleep. But unfortunately for Abe, the scene then shifts to the police station, where a senior officer has pulled some strings to get Abe out of trouble. He knows that Abe isn't a bad person, but warns him from pulling such stunts ever again. The cop also advises Abe to drop this detective act, and do something productive from now on. From that day on, Abe's life begins to fall apart. The newspapers label him as a creep, so he spends the entire day at home, binging on alcohol and drugs. His detective work also comes to a halt, and he ignores every call from Caroline. One morning, she shows up at his door, and tells him that someone has left an origami in her locker. Abe barely reacts, and says it's probably from Calvin, who's been secretly in love with her. He simply hands her the note he found before leaving. A few more days slip by, and Abe's addiction to the drug takes an even darker turn. He spends his nights in a daze, pushing his limits with alcohol and drugs. One morning, he wakes up in a garbage dumpster, completely naked and reeking of everything he's become. Later, Abe gets a call from Caroline, who reveals that she's at his doorstep. It is revealed that he called her last night under the influence, promising to solve the case at any cost. This proves to be a much-needed boost for Abe, so he heads to Caroline's house. There, the two share their sorrows and connect over how miserable their lives have become. Later, Abe returns to his office for the first time in weeks, only to find it in complete chaos. It turns out his assistant had some friends over in his absence, as there were no customers coming in anyway. Abe finds an origami on his table, which Caroline had left for him. When he opens it, his eyes widen as if he recognizes this exact design. Shortly after, Abe heads straight to his parents' house, and pulls out his old box containing clues from Gracie's investigation. Inside, he finds a sheet of paper with the exact same fold pattern as the origami. This discovery makes Abe realize that the person who kidnapped Gracie is the same one sending origamis to Caroline, so he calls her and warns her to stay indoors. The next morning, Abe visits Gracie's mother, who has kept her daughter's room untouched for the past 20 years. As he looks inside a drawer, he finds the exact same origami, confirming his suspicion. But the problem is Abe still has no idea who could have given it. That night, Abe heads to the bar to unwind, but the mood shifts when the bartender brings up Rory. He tells Abe it's time to apologize for getting Rory suspended all those years ago. Abe refuses to do so, but the bartender asserts that Rory never stole anything, and that's why he's carried so much hate ever since. Upon hearing this, a series of flashbacks flood through Abe's mind, and it finally dawns on him that Rory was set up. He now knows who the real perpetrator behind all of this is. Without wasting any time, Abe rushes to the said person's home and breaks inside. He rummages through the belongings until he finds a safe, which he opens with a paperclip. Inside, Abe finally finds the lewd picture of Patrick's second girlfriend, leaving him in shock. But then, the owner of the house arrives, forcing him to hide under the bed. But a careless Abe forgets to discard the paperclip.
Abe, I know you're in the closet.
I'm under the bed.
In the next scene, Abe sits face to face with the owner, who turns out to be none other than Principal Irwin. Abe coldly reminds him of the first case he ever brought, and says he might have made a mistake by implicating the wrong kid. He accuses Irwin of staging that case to test his skills, just a week before Gracie's disappearance. Abe now believes that his failure gave the principal the confidence to move forward with something far more sinister. Irwin firmly denies the accusation, but Abe doesn't back down. He reveals that he found the photo that was stolen from Patrick's locker, the one of the tiger-masked girl. Abe knows that Irwin was obsessed with Caroline, and assumed the girl in the photo was her. Believing Patrick had defiled her, Irwin killed him in a fit of delusion and rage. This reveals that the old man is actually a pedophile who preys on teenage girls. Realizing he has been caught, Irwin finally cracks. He admits that he kidnapped Gracie all those years ago, but says she didn't survive long after he gave their daughter away. In a disturbing twist, he reveals that the daughter is Caroline, whom he had to abandon at a church. He also confesses to killing Patrick, then mockingly congratulates Abe for finally solving his first murder case. After this, Irwin whips out a knife, seemingly to attack Abe. But
now they'll know what we were capable of.
he instead stabs himself repeatedly in the chest, ending his pathetic life. Horrified, Abe hurries to the fridge and gulps down a bottle of beer. And this is when his eyes land on the rows of pop sodas neatly stacked inside. That small detail suddenly clicks, and a wave of realization hits him. An anxious Abe then walks to the nearby shed, and pulls open the door. To his utter shock, he finds Gracie inside, still alive but severely frail and malnourished. In the aftermath, Abe narrates how his life began to turn around. He became a national hero, the governor presented him with a medal, and most satisfying of all, Rory finally shook his hand. Later, Abe returns to his office, and finds Caroline waiting for him. She's still processing the painful truth, that she's the result of a forced relationship, but at least now, she has answers. Abe then asks if her mom, Gracie, has reached out to her yet, but Caroline says she's just a kid. In the final scene, Abe's parents visit his home, and are stunned to see how much has changed. He's living alone now, and the place is clean and organized. The parents smile, and express their pride of how far he's come, but he remains gloomy. When they ask what's wrong, Abe suddenly begins crying, and this is where the movie ends. Okay guys, thanks for watching. See you again in the next video.